Hi everyone, welcome back to another lightsaber video. Today we're going to be talking about this brand new Graflex that I just built. This is a Graflex from The Empire Strikes Back, but it's not the one that you see on Luke's belt in Bespin, which is the one that most people build. That one is right here. And yes, they do look very, very similar first glance. Both of them obviously have two buttons, one on the top, one on the bottom. That clamp card with the circuit board, the thin strip of chrome tape, the grips with the notches, etc. So this is the classic one that we all build. That's the iconic ESB Graflex. This is the one that is on Luke's belt in Bespin. We see it throughout the film as a belt hanger. There's another belt hanger in ESB, which is this one. This is the Dagobah version. That one differs slightly in that it has a little screws on top of the grips there. One of the grips is curved. It's missing one of the buttons from the top. There's a couple of other subtle differences I won't go into. So these are the main two belt hangers in ESB. One is from Bespin and one is from Dagobah. So this new one that I've just built is not really a belt hanger, it's more of a stunt saber. So what I mean by that is that the prop department would have built another one of these, another few actually of these. Usually they would have drilled some holes in the top there, attach some bolts and use those to fix a rod, which is essentially a blade for dueling. And this is the stunt sabers that's used in action scenes. So, for example, obviously the duel right at the end on Cloud City, there would have been a stunt Graflex. Anytime really when Luke ignites his saber. So this one, this is the Wampa Dagobah stunt hilt, and you see it in in the Wampa scene. Obviously, when Luke is trying to escape from the Wampa and he pulls it with the force, it's in the snow like this, and he pulls it towards him with the force, and then he uses it to free himself and kill the Wampa and escape. You also see it, I think it's the same one that Han uses to slice the Tauntaun open earlier on or later on. I'm sure it's used in Dagobah in a couple of scenes. It might be in the cave scene in Dagobah, but I'm not too sure about that. I do know that from some behind the scenes pictures that it was used in both Hoth and Dagobah as a stunt saber. So the reason I wanted to build this for a long time is that because it has a few kind of differences to the other ones, and also because this hilt was interesting in that it eventually became a DV6. Now this is not 100% confirmed, but there is enough evidence to support that theory that at least partially, if not the full hilt, would eventually become the DV6, which of course is Vader's Return of the Jedi stunt hilt. So it's interesting prop in terms of lineage. It also has some sort of nice, unique little features on it, which I'll go through later. So some of the differences quickly is that the top button there has that thin strip of knurling, which is unique to this one. It also has the beer tab preserved, unlike any of the other ESB ones, where the beer tab is removed. What else? Most of it is the same, really. I mostly wanted to build it because I came by a hilt with the exact accurate stamping, which I'll talk about later. But yeah, let's talk about the build now. So this is actually a vintage Graflex. So it's a Graflex 3-cell, and it is a Fulmer non-patent. So it's got the most rare variant of the three, the Fulmer New York, without the patent number. So this would be the oldest before they acquired the patent number and then moved on to become Graflex Inc. And this is definitely the version that was used for this prop. So it is a vintage, all vintage Graflex, Fulmer, New York, non-pattern. Now this obviously came with a glass eye, which I removed and replaced with a standard red button with a full knurling. You can see here it has the nice smooth pins of a Fulmer and that little brass pin there in the bunny ears, so you know it's an early Fulmer. And that nice flat, thin beer tab rivet, which again is a tell of an early Fulmer. And this button, as I said, is an early Fulmer variant with a thin strip of knurling there. So this was seen on this prop, and it was also seen in A New Hope in Luke's stunt tilt that he actually ignites. It also had one of these buttons on. So yeah, so it's a vintage with an extra vintage button there on the bottom. The clamp, I again covered the Graflex stamping with a thin strip of chrome tape, as usual. All of these had this feature in common. Pretty much everything in ESB is like that. You can see that it's an early Fulmer from the lever with a small rusty pin. And one of my favorite things about this build is this clamp card right here. This is actually a vintage card that has been cut from a 1975 Otis board. This is the Otis board right here. This is an Otis elevator board. These have become very, very rare. I was extremely lucky to find someone selling theirs, and it was intact. So I sent it over to a friend of mine, and it had enough on it, enough of the PCB to cut 2 cards, and I offered him one and I took the other one. I do also have a vintage card, but I bought this one from someone else on the Best Bin. So this is my second vintage Otis card. This one's really nicely weathered, sort of natural weathering. And what I like about this, the way we had it cut, is that from the other side, it looks like that. It's your standard kind of thin traces that are offset. But from the reverse, what's nice about this is it has one fat trace, if you can see that there, that thicker trace there, that silver trace right at the edge. And that is accurate for this prop, because in the scene where it's kind of plunged into the snow, if you're looking at it exactly from this angle, you could just make out that this trace is a lot more obvious than the rest. So it's got to be that fat trace. So this was a beautiful little accuracy mod that I wanted to include in this build. So yeah, once again, beer tap preserved, early Fulmer button with the thin knurling, and the Otis card with the thick trace at the end. These are the sort of the main 3 features that make this prop unique. From here down, it's about the same as every other ESB. So these are Wampa grips. I had them a little bit weathered. The 6 screws you see here are also vintage from Exactra calculators. I cut them down, painted them black, and glued them on the grips to avoid drilling any holes. And finally, on the bottom, the cobalt clip is also a vintage, taken from a cobalt flash. So what I do normally is I cut down the rivets, I glue them on to the cobalt after I've sort of cut them down to length, mount them on the cobalt, glue them, weather them so that they look like they've been popped. I'm just going to zoom into them. There you can see it almost looks like they've been popped, but they've not actually been popped. They've just been cut down. The D-ring is from Wampa. I haven't managed to find the right size and shape of vintage D-ring. So really the only replica parts are D-ring, rivets, grips, and that's it. Everything else on this build is all vintage. So the final thing to say about this is the orientation. This is the Wampa accurate stamping. And this is why I immediately grabbed this flash. Not only does it have the Fulmer non-patent, but it has it oriented in exactly the right way for the Wampa cave scene. So in that scene with the hilt in the snow like that, you can kind of see that from the side of the kobold, from this side, you could just make out the letters ER New York. So Fulmer, the Fulmer is covered, so you could just see the ER New York on this side, and from the other side, the ADE, made by. And that's, when you sort of zoom into the reference pictures, that's exactly how it looks. But obviously you can do that to any of them really, but the trick is, if you line up the kobold to show the stamping like the Wampas, it has to sort of line up with a clamp. So, and that's why I went for this, because the stamping was already oriented in a way in relation to the clamp that as soon as I put the kobold on, everything kind of lined up exactly like it is in the Wampa scene. So the grips I just eyeballed. I didn't do like an idealized placement with a grip guide or anything like that. Literally, I just looked at the reference pictures and matched each grip to what letters were just underneath it. That's why they're a little bit wonky and all over the place, but that's how they look on the real prop. So you can see this one is offset there to the right, and it's pointing to the right side of the clamp. This one is a little bit more centered. And the final thing I want to say about this is the damage on the kobold. So I did this damage intentionally in 3 spots, 1, 2, 3, and this is there on the real prop, and it also matches the damage of the kobold of the D6. Now this is obviously much more rusty and weathered, but you can see the same 3 spots of damage, 1, 2, 3. So just put them side by side, and you could see, hopefully it's clear. I matched them anyway, just because the real props do match. You'll notice that the rivets on the DV6 are smaller, but on the real prop, there's sort of marks right around the rivets. So what's probably happened is that this kobold was removed, and that's why the larger rivets left a little bit of a mark, and then they reattached it with a pair of smaller rivets, and they probably put some sort of a sheet of brass on top to cover the stamping or something like that. We don't really know too much about the DV6, but from the damage that's on the kobold, it's definitely the exact same kobold that was used. So it was likely that the whole lower, at least, if not the whole flash, was the same one as this one. And these holes that were drilled into it were I don't know why there's so many, but these were the holes and the bolts that are usually used to hold the blade. I obviously did not want to drill any holes on this and destroy this beautiful flash, but it would have had at least 2 holes drilled into it. Something like that here and here to start with. Why they added these other ones later, I'm not sure. Remember, you can mostly see this sort of in the snow like that, so any holes into it would not be visible. So yeah, I think that's it. I've covered it. So this is once again, this is the stunt saber from Empire Strikes Back, used in the Wampa cave scene, also in some scenes in Dagobah. It was also used as a belt hanger briefly here and there, but it's not one of the two main belt hangers. Build-wise, it is a vintage Graflex, Fulmer non-patent, with an early button, a late button, which is a Graflex ink, preserved beer tab, a vintage Otis card with one thick trace at the end, one Awanga grips, 6 vintage screws, vintage cobalt, lined up with the clamp to show the Wampa stamping, and damaged and weathered to match the DV6. And then just finally just rivets, D-ring, etc., which are replica parts. And so that's it. Okay, here they are right next to each other. Just to do one last visual comparison between the three. These are my 3 ESB Graflexes. That one's Bespin belt hanger, that one's a Dagobah belt hanger, and this is a brand new Wampa Dagobah stunt saber. I call this the Snowflex. It's just a name I come up with when I was having a chat to one of my friends, just for ease. Just because Wampa Dagobah stunt is quite kind of a long name, so I've just decided to call it the Snowflex since we know it from the snow scene. But yeah, I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.